This is the third in a series of instructional videos from the School of Boxing. The boxer is Laszlo Kelemen and the instructor Janos, Nagy. There are three parts of this instructional video. First, a fight. Second, an introduction to the basics of defense. And finally, an introduction to counterpunching. Okay, let's move on to the first chapter. In this chapter, we see the coach throwing various punches and the student blocking them. These are not combination punches, these are simply single punches, which the student blocks in various ways. Here, in the second round, you see the student blocking combination punches from the coach. As you can see, he's blocking them to various parts of the body in various ways, which will be broken down later in the video. Okay, in the third and final part of this fight, we see the student and the coach working together dynamically, practicing defense and counterpunching. And while this may look like a late night fight, something that you might be more familiar with, there's no mystery about this at all. Each of these techniques will be broken down later in the video. And so with a lot of practice and a lot of time and effort, you too will be able to box like this. Okay, moving on to the second part of this instructional video, the basics of defense. We're going to start off by looking at blocking. You see here the coach throwing a left jab, which is blocked by the student's right hand, always left to right, right to left, no crossing over in boxing. And then throwing a right jab, which is blocked by the student's left forearm. Okay, the second technique that we're looking at here is brushing. The coach throws a jab, which the student brushes away from his head, maintaining one hand by his face at all times in order to protect himself from any other punch from the coach. The technique that we're now looking at is slipping. In response to his coach's punches, the student moves his entire body, but crucially not his feet, to avoid the blows. Notice, however, that he doesn't move too far. He wishes to maintain energy and keep it as natural and fluid as possible. We're now moving on to one of the most dynamic defensive moves, that of the sidestep. Here, similar to slipping, but the student moves his entire foot and his body, and this is in preparation for a counterpunch. If you look, when he sidesteps, he immediately has access to the coach's head. Fifth technique we're looking at is how to block a body punch. Notice the coach throws punches at his student's body. The student moves his body, countering the punches, but does not bring his arms out to block the punches that are being thrown at him. The sixth element of defence is crouching down. In this we can see the coach throws a punch and the student crouches and, in this case, counter punches to the coach's stomach. Here we see the student blocking the uppercut. Notice the coach throws the uppercut and the student blocks it with the inside of his arm while always maintaining the other hand by his face in order to protect his chin. The technique we're now looking at is blocking the hook. Here the instructor throws a punch, the student blocks, moving downwards, using his legs, discovering his centre of gravity, preparing him for an effective counterpunch. And the final technique we're considering, the basics of defence, is ducking. Here, the student ducks underneath the coach's punch, and while it may be tempting to look at the canvas as you duck, it's very, very important to always remember you need to look where the punches are coming from, you need to look straight at your coach. The third part of this instructional video is about counterpunching. This is when we put the basics of defence into practice. Here we can see blocking. The student blocks his right hand, followed by a left jab, or vice versa. The important thing is that the student always blocks with one hand and counterpunches with the other hand. Second technique here is brushing. The student responds to the coach's attack with a brush, reaches his centre of gravity, and then counterpunches. Third technique here is slipping. In this dynamic move, the student responds to the coach's punch by slipping sideways, reaching his centre of gravity and responding with a right hook or a left hook. The next counter-punching technique we're looking at is the side step. Here, the student steps to one side and punches with a hook. Notice if it's a left step, he punches with the left hand, right step with the right hand. Gaining momentum from the step. The fifth technique we're looking at is countering the body punch. Here, the student blocks his coach's attempt to punch his body before countering with a left jab and a straight right hand, or a straight right hand and a left jab. Here the same basic principle applies, which is that the student punches with the hand that he hasn't blocked with. The next technique we're looking at is the signature technique of Janos, Nagy, with which he knocked out many opponents. Here, the coach throws a punch, the student ducks, throwing a left body punch, followed immediately by a straight right hand and a left jab to the opponent's face. We're moving on now to the seventh form of counterpunching, blocking the uppercut. Here, the coach throws an uppercut. The student responds either with a left hook and a right uppercut, or a right hook and a left uppercut. The important thing here is that the student is using both sides of his body and responding in combinations to the offensive moves. In the eighth part of counterpunching, we see a challenge for our hard-working student. Here, the student throws a punch and the coach counterpunches. The test is of the student's reactions and reflexes to see if he can defend himself from the counterpunches that his experienced coach throws at him. The ninth form of counterpunching that we're now looking at is a response to the hook. Here, the student blocks a hook and counterpunches with a closed but dynamic left hook followed by right hook, or right hook followed by left hook. It's very important to notice that he's punching from his legs here. Here we see the student practicing a ducking technique for counterpunching. In response to his coach's hooks, the student throws a left or right uppercut to the coach's body, followed immediately by a right or left hook in combination.